patient satisfaction just plays an important role, and a provider who's just giving all of their attention to the patient during the visit and not giving that attention to the electronic health record, they're communicating with confidence, they're not distracted, they're going to deliver better care. Um, and I think patients feel that sense of connection, virtual or in person.
Yeah.
And that connection is what a lot of patients are really have great desire around. They want to feel heard and understood and attended to, and distractions for the provider take away from that.
Welcome to Medical Money Matters, the podcast where you can find experts, answers, and resources so that you can achieve mastery over the financial and business aspects of your practice. Episode 12. If it ain't written down, it didn't happen. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jill Arena. I began my career in accounting and finance, and I have more than 30 years of experience running medical groups. I own and operate a national healthcare consulting and revenue cycle company, and I am the author of Physician Heal Thy Financial Self. In 2020, I co-founded the Physician Leadership Project, and my passion is to increase financial and business literacy for physicians. Welcome, everyone. I am joined today by Warren Johnson, who has been an innovator in healthcare staffing and software as a service for more than 3 decades. Warren founded Stat Medical Services, which became the largest nurse staffing company in the Pacific Northwest with more than 700 employees. He also founded ShiftWise, the largest healthcare vendor management system, which served over 2,000 hospitals. And several years ago, he co-founded Scribe-X and currently serves as the CEO of Scribe-X and is launching their telehealth platform for remote scribing and continues as an innovator in healthcare today. I'm also very happy to say I get to count Warren as a friend. So, Warren, thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
exciting.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a little bit about the title of our session today being If It Ain't Written Down, It Didn't Happen, and how scribes can help physicians, both with documentation but also with finances of their clinics. So I'm excited to jump right in to all the questions that we have today and to get into this conversation. So I have been talking in previous episodes about how adding a scribe can have a positive financial impact for any clinician who sees patients. So tell us a little bit about what you've seen with your clients.
Yeah, thank you. Well, what we've seen predominantly, the reason people sign up to use our service is to relieve this burden of documentation from the provider and restore some quality of life by adding back at least 2 hours a day to each provider's day, which they would otherwise spend in the EHR, generally after hours. Call it pajama time, which is the time they spend outside of the clinic with, normally they spend with their family or friends or pets. And now they're on their computer documenting visits from earlier in the day. So that quality of life is a big impact. And then how people approach scribes to drive financial health is varied, and we can talk a little bit about those strategies. But predominantly, what's happening is the visit is just more efficient, and by being more efficient, uh, providers feel a lot more comfortable adding patients to their schedule
Hmm.
to kind of address the no-shows or improve access for their patients. Or they add a bit of clinical time to their day in lieu of the time they would have been spending documenting.
Yeah.
So it has a huge impact. It's basically like adding a team member, care team member to the team. And that team member can do clerical work for other team members like the MAs, prepping the charts, often is an MA job or a provider job. that's something the scribe can do, or managing inboxes, so that that volume of communication can be skinnied down, and the actionable things the provider can deal with just those. So
Oh, well, you make a
I can
compelling
talk for
case.
hours on this.
Yes, you could. You make a compelling case for the quality of life improvements, and we'll come back to that. The one I want to hone in on a little more is the finance piece. So maybe you can tell us a story or two. What are some of the best financial outcomes you've seen from your clients adding scribes?
Yeah, well, we're based out of Oregon, so I would say early in our journey, there's at least 3 clinics that we did a lot of data tracking with, and what we've seen is impacts in a variety of ways. So one is in terms of capturing the full value of the visit by making sure those things are coded properly, and that most importantly, the scribe's job is to support whatever code is picked, right? So
Yeah.
if you're picking a level 4 visit, the provider has a lot of confidence that that visit is being supported, and in a fee for service model, they're attracting or they're garnering the highest possible reimbursement. So in that respect, what we've seen is that we'll see an 8% minimum improvement in the value of the charts that the provider is documenting. And what we've seen is the maximum is about a 27% with an average of about 15.
Okay.
So that's kind of the range.
Okay.
Productivity has a huge impact on finances. So if the provider can see a couple more patients a day, that almost always pays for the program.
Hmm.
But best performance we've seen, and we've seen this with about a dozen providers in different organizations, is in the 79 or 80% range. So an example would be we walk into a primary care provider's office, we provide him a scribe or her a scribe, and they're seeing 14 patients a day. We confidently can get that to 25 or more patients a day. So we've seen that level of impact, about an 80% improvement in the productivity.
Wow.
And time savings, we're generally seeing 2.5 hours or so saved, but and that can be used for other, seeing patients, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, we'll get
those
to
are kind
the
of the main impacts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We'll get to the lifestyle positive impacts in a minute because I do want to focus on that. But so I just want to recap what you just said. So 8 to 27% increase in the value of the visit. So I assume that translates. And as we're talking with the group here and demystifying financial statements and helping with finance terms, um, I want to translate that into an 8 to 27% increase in revenue for the
Correct.
clinic. Okay. Yeah, that's profound. I mean, that's really,
Yeah.
that takes me into my next question. But as you and I have talked over the years about scribes as an intervention for outpatient medicine, you've heard me say, my humble opinion is every clinician who sees patients would benefit from having a scribe. What are there some cases you can think of where it wouldn't make sense for a clinician to add a scribe?
Yeah, I mean, the primary situation where it doesn't work is if the provider's not interested in giving feedback on the note, right?
Okay.
So scribes get better, kind of like AI, right? The more you put information into it and provide corrections on how it interprets that data, the better it gets. And scribes are basically the same way. These are folks that want to go to medical school or nursing school, PA school. They want to get better. They want to do a good job. And so if you're not interested in giving them feedback, they're not going to perform in that upper echelon that we were just referencing, right?
Mm, yeah.
Um, if the provider, let's say, is a difficult personality, if they've burned through 2 or 3 MAs in the last year, that might be a sign that the scribe may not stick around very long either.
Got it.
And they're making an investment of time to get them up to speed. And once you have them up to speed, you want them to be around for a while,
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
better. So that's probably the main situation. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Or if
Um,
they don't have enough patients to fill the schedule, so you don't have a much backlog, which I think a lot of organizations don't have that problem right now, but,
I think there are a lot of clinics that have the opposite problem right now, yeah, but in the event that there's not enough, demand for service, then it might not make financial sense to add the scribe. That's great. And that's you bring up a good point about the training piece and the time expectation. So could you talk a little bit about that when you add a scribe in? How long should a physician or a clinician expect to train that person before they're really up to speed and you're seeing those, 8 to 27% results?
mhm. Well, from our perspective, we're putting about a month of training into them. I'm not sure that other scribe programs, I'm pretty sure they're not putting quite as much into getting them ready.
Mhm.
We use a consultative model, which kind of looks at what is the current workflow,
Mhm.
efficiencies and inefficiencies that the providers engaged in now, and what they want the chart to look like. But let's just assume the training before the scribe arrives is all uniform, right?
Yeah.
They're starting with the same baseline. What we see is that most scribes are adequate in their proficiency within a couple weeks, meaning they can keep up with the provider. The provider's not spending more than an hour with the scribe correcting and inputting, their medical decision making into the notes. And we call that the apprentice phase. And that phase is when we put an expert scribe with the scribe to
Mhm.
get them to that level. Once they finish that part of the training, most scribes are pretty proficient within um, 30 days from starting with that provider,
Yeah.
and all are proficient within 60.
Great.
So if a provider was willing to put an hour into the scribe, in terms of correcting and helping them tailor the notes to what they want
Mhm.
a day for a month, they're going to be pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And if they're when they do that for 2 months, they're going to be, in most cases, excellent.
Wonderful. Well, that's great, and it's good to have that notion up front that there is an investment of time and energy to getting this. Usually, it's a young person to getting this young person
Right.
up to speed with you and understanding, as a clinician, what it is you want out of the notes.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of that kind of you get out of it what you put into it,
That's
so to
right.
speak. So.
Exactly right, Jill.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about the coding and compliance. I know you've mentioned to me before, you've had some clients that really measure that, and I'm curious what you've learned as you've watched clinicians add scribes and how that assists with their coding.
Yeah, so the scribe in some specialties can do the chart prep and determine what the code is likely to be for that patient. So some providers feel very comfortable saying, "Hey, pick the code. I'll correct it later, um, but at least let's get the level correct, right, based
Yeah.
on the number of open diagnoses and things like that." So but what really is the most valuable part, regardless of who picks the code to chart to, is how that's being supported. So, as you know, with a level 4, there's certain things that have to be addressed to support that.
Yeah.
The scribes are well versed. This is a major part of their training. Well versed in what those things are, and so they can make sure that those items are hit and addressed in the note. The provider may have to make some, corrections around medical decision making, et cetera. But at the end of the day, those codes are very well supported. And in the literature, 85% of most providers undercode the chart
Yep.
because they're afraid
Yeah.
that it will be audited. And so they're not really charting or picking codes with confidence. And it's kind of the opposite when you have a scribe, because now the provider has a lot of confidence that whatever is happening in that room is being captured, and it's
Yeah.
being captured accurately
Yeah.
and timely, right? And so the providers just are more, um, I think, more accurate with their coding, um, because they're willing to step into that space of being confident.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you bring up a good point that just that ability to have things documented timely and completely will, we hope, help the clinicians feel a little more confident. And
Yeah.
we are talking further in different episodes about coding. And really, my encouragement for clinicians is that they get credit for what they've done for their patients. And
Mhm.
to your point, frequently there's not a lot of confidence in the coding, or maybe there's not a lot of confidence in the documentation, and the documentation's ability to stand up under audit. So I imagine you see a huge surge in confidence when you have a scribe and you've got much more robust notes and better documentation.
Well, if you think about it, right, they're seeing patients 7 or more hours a day generally. It's pretty difficult to capture everything that's happened in the room in an hour, 2 or 3 documenting. So the scribe is documenting 8 hours for, or 8.5 hours for a 7 hours of clinical time,
Yeah.
and that's their only job. And so I think providers are often really surprised at all the value they're delivering in a visit because they're not used to capturing everything. They're kind of
Exactly.
cherry picking the most important things. They're often missing a whole bunch of things that happen in that visit.
Yeah.
So,
And when
yeah,
someone else is recording it all, and somehow it
exactly.
gets captured. Yeah, I imagine that's a pleasant surprise,
It is
for a lot of people. Yeah.
very validating.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, tell me a little more about the other benefits of having a scribe. If I'm a clinician, you touched on a couple of them early in the conversation, but yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, I think as we move more and more to value based contracts with payers, we move more and more to quality measures and the incentives that are aligned around that. Um, what we're finding is that many um, clinics are needing to capture that for financial reasons. They are, wanting to capture that for, the overall benefit of that patient. They need to be really attentive to closing out issues, not just opening new ones constantly and not resolving any of them. Um, I think in that world that we're headed into, again, it gives clinics much more confidence to step into value based contracts, knowing that what is being done in the room to address those are being captured.
Yeah.
And so value based contracts are it's kind of a fun name because for many clinics that really rely on those, they're incredibly valuable.
Mhm.
So they can be
Mhm.
very profitable for
Yeah.
a lot of health clinics, and so we're seeing value there. We're now been doing this long enough to where our scribes that we were working with back in the late 2015, 16
Mhm.
realm. Those folks are becoming doctors and physicians
Mm.
assistants and going back and working in the clinics as providers,
Yeah.
which is kind of a cool,
Great. Yeah, that's
great.
like they've graduated. Yeah. They're
They've graduated and they had a great experience, so they go back to the health center where they were scribing.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
familiar place, a supported place, and
So you see it as a long-term recruitment play. That's an interesting thing to think about.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other benefits are, if I'm a provider and quality of life matters to me, I'm going to pick a clinic that has a scribe program. I may be willing to take less money because I know my quality of life is going to be better. So the retention, recruitment, and retention of providers is pretty powerful thing, especially if your provider turnover is tends to be a little high, maybe higher than the norm,
Yeah.
right? You're more likely to retain that provider because you're giving them back a couple hours a day or more,
Yeah.
and you're creating headspace for them to do the things that they went into medicine to do.
Mhm.
which is, focus on the patient and not the electronic health record.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's I would say a huge benefit as well. And then the things that are more subtle, I think, is this idea of they're part of the care team now. You've maybe got a 5-member care team, and now you have a scribe, so you have a 6-member care team. And in those environments, there is some heavy lifting that scribe is doing that ultimately allows that MA to room more patients, follow up on more items in a timely manner, do a better job, and and so it feels like you're gifting something very valuable to the entire team, not just to the provider.
Yeah.
And MAs, turnover is difficult with MAs, just in general. Finding them and retaining them is just tough for everybody. It's not just your clinic, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
and then I think
that's an
last thing I
excellent point. Just thinking about the satisfaction of the care team as a whole and increasing that. I hadn't really thought about that, but
yeah.
yeah, adding that additional member, like you say, to the care team has got to make a positive impact for everyone else. And we've talked also in previous episodes about the cost of staff and the cost of turnover, and we're going to explore that in a little bit more in a future episode. But I like the notion of a scribe as a professional satisfier for the whole team.
Oh, there you go.
Great way
I
to
like
think
that.
about
Can
it.
I coin that?
Yeah, you can borrow that. You can
Ooh,
steal
coin
it.
that.
It's all yours.
And one other thing that the other people don't think about that as much either, because we're so focused on the provider. Often, what can we do to help the provider? What can we do to help the team? What can we do for our finances? But the other part is, I feel like as consolidation accelerates, and it always does when things get tough, right?
Hmm.
Um, you're in competition for patients as well. And if you can, you're going to be much more effective in garnering value-based contracts and negotiating things if you have good data that you're collecting through the
Hmm.
process of documentation. And and when you were thinking about those contracts, they're basically awarding patients to you, right? In some sense. And I think patient satisfaction just plays an important role. And a provider who's just giving all of their attention to the patient during the visit and not giving that attention to the electronic health record, they're communicating with confidence, they're not distracted, they're going to deliver better care. Um, and I think patients feel that sense of connection, virtual or in person.
Yeah.
And that connection is what a lot of patients are really have great desire around. They want to feel heard and understood and attended to, and distractions for the provider take away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
I've
just
heard that.
another value I think is
Yeah,
important.
I've heard that multiple times that the patient experience with a clinician with a scribe is much more eye contact, much better communication, much better focus. And the patient's perception is actually that they had a longer time with the physician because his or her attention wasn't divided. So,
Right.
yeah, no, it's I know I've said this to you in the past. I consider it a win-win-win. It's
Mhm.
typically the clinicians are happier, the patient is happier, and the finances are better. So,
Mhm.
as you know, I've been a fan of the
Yeah.
notion of a scribe for a lot of years. Talk a little bit about the scribes themselves, these young smart people that wanna go to medical school. What do they get out of being a scribe?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that question. Thank you. Well, the people that we are hiring to do these jobs have a common characteristic, and that is they've made a decision, often early in life, to become a care provider. So they want to become a nurse or a physician's assistant or a DO or an MD. They have a very singular focus around that, and so they go to college, they finish college, they usually go to, pretty good universities, and they get exceptionally good grades. They're professional students. They are brilliant, truly brilliant, the best of the best when it comes to academia, right? They often don't have a lot of work experience, so we're
Mhm.
bringing them into the workforce for the first time, in some cases, and really showing them how to be a professional, what it means to show up at work on time, what it means to dress appropriately, what it means to how to ask a question, when to ask a question, those kinds of things. So we really work with them on that. So they're getting this really valuable, really first career kind of opportunity. And as they go through this experience of getting all this training, which is a lot of information very quickly, they're unique in their ability to really absorb that information and retain it and get better.
Yeah.
We often look for people who've been competitive in sports or music,
Mm.
those kinds of things, and then we are the stepping stone for them to get into these very competitive graduate level programs, whether it be PA school, nursing, some cases nursing school, not always a graduate, right, but
Yeah.
undergrad, and then
Yeah.
medical school. And 62% of all of the folks that graduate from these, universities with great GPAs take a gap year,
Mm.
and
Okay.
the rest go directly into these schools, but 62% do that. And then more than half of those folks are looking for scribe opportunities. And a scribe opportunity is a major differentiator because the people who have been scribes and want to go to medical school, for example, they know what it's like day in and day out
Yes.
to be a
Yeah.
provider.
Yeah. Yeah.
They see the good days, the bad days, the rewarding parts of patient care, the challenging parts of patient
Yes.
care, the
Yes.
challenging parts of working with a care team, the benefits of working with a care team,
Yeah.
and they get pretty seasoned. Um, we have a very high success rates of people that work with us and go are successful in getting into school.
Mm.
So we
Okay.
feel really like an important part of their journey, and we don't have them for very long.
Yeah.
A year. We've had some people much longer, 8 years, I think was our top. But
Just yeah.
we have them for a while, and our job is just to help them get in. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, that adds there's a lot of layers there, and, it's impressive to think about, the contribution that being a scribe is to their career, and it's really, as you say, it's a real insider's look. It's a very intimate look at what it is to be a clinician, and, probably one of very few ways that they would get that kind of insight that quickly, into the career that they've chosen. And I imagine probably a few select out as a result, and that likely just makes our medical school system that much better. You're really vetting those candidates, and they are vetting themselves. That
yeah,
uh,
well said.
they get
Yeah,
they get a chance to really see very insider's look at what
yeah. The other
happens.
alternative is for them to work in a research lab,
Yeah, yeah.
and so this is,
Not,
I think, a much better path to
I was
market.
going to say not nearly as interesting, right? That's
Yeah,
I'm sure there are a lot of people who love research. It wouldn't be that interesting for me, that's for certain. Well, it's I've heard the Scribe uh program referred to as this is a program that is training the next generation of physicians coming up.
hmm
And
yeah,
that's a wonderful way to think about it. And it sounds like one of my questions for you was going to be what's it doing for the workforce? And it sounds like it's really helping people be assured that they wanna make the time and financial commitment to go through medical school and residency, and, also that they are frequently returning back home. I love hearing those stories of, people going
yeah.
back to the clinic where they had a positive experience scribing 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. So fantastic. Wonderful. Well, what other advice would you wanna give to our physician audience who may be considering adding a scribe?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're I would strongly recommend not to do it yourself. We have many customers who've not only tried to do it themselves, but have looked at other types of solutions, which have different values in terms of the results. But the reason is that I'd say 75% of the programs that we've seen launched internally fail,
Mm,
and they fail at a great expense. You're burning through a lot of political capital with your providers. You're trying to be a training company, a staffing company, a professional development company. It's a big burden on your HR team to. I'll give you an example. For every 100 people that we deem appropriate for the job, 19% of them get to the this final stage of training.
wow. Okay.
So we're 81 people are failing
Hmm.
some part of the process before they sit with your providers. So
Yeah.
that's one thing
Yeah.
to consider. The other thing that I think is important is if you do go into a program, give it enough time
Mhm.
to be successful. We do 6-month pilots. I think 6 months is a really good time to
Yeah.
introduce the service, test drive the service, get feedback from your providers, get feedback from the finance team, and see how you're doing. And our programs generally provide 100% return on the investment. So if you're spending $40,000 on a scribe with us, you should be getting at least $80,000 of new revenue. And
Mhm.
we've seen those be 384 is the top number I've seen,
Okay.
which is where the productivity's gone up, the charge capture's gone up. Um,
Yeah.
and those are the big drivers.
Yeah.
Quality measures have long-term value in driving, a return,
Yeah.
but we're generally not counting those.
Okay.
The other thing to consider too is really look at your downstream revenue. A lot of people are looking at deciding to go forward or not go forward based on the visit value. So if
Mhm.
you're getting $100 per visit, you got to see 2 to 3 scribes more or patients more to pay for it.
Mm.
But in some cases, you could count the downstream revenue, and maybe you're only having to add one or less visits per day on
Got it.
average.
Got it.
Um, the other thing to consider is if you have a lot of backlog, too, um, there's a lot of realized revenue sitting out there that will go away if you don't attend to it. So,
Mhm.
especially in the specialty clinics, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say make sure you're ready operationally to implement this, so you can get providers that are really excited. They want it. They want the help. They want the support. I would just make sure that you have a good, solid clinical and operational champion that can give this, some time, 2, 3, 4 hours a week during the pilot phase, something like that. It generally doesn't take quite that much time, but I'd just plan worst case scenario. A
Yeah.
lot of it depends on the size of the program that you're launching, and then give it a test drive with enough broad breadth, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got your high producers, your medium producers, your low producers, your at risk providers. Um, Test drive it with different groups
Mhm.
in the pilot to see where you're getting the biggest impact. And interestingly for us, it's always the high producers that get the most value. It's kind of the counterintuitive a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
But those are some considerations. I'd measure your ROI at the end of the pilot.
Mhm.
Don't be looking at it 2 weeks in and going, "Oh my god,
Yeah. Yeah.
you haven't added any patients."
Yeah.
You should add those patients right away,
Mhm.
so you can begin to see the value over months that the pilot is run. So
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so very much for the whole entire conversation. It's always
sure.
a treat, and I always learn something new when we get a chance to chat about scribes. As I said, one of my favorite interventions for improving operations in the outpatient settings. Still is, however many years later. So wonderful. Well, we will be sure to include Warren's contact information in the show notes. And I know he would welcome questions or comments if you have any thoughts or ideas or questions for him. And
Absolutely.
thank you again, Warren, for joining me. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and wish everybody the best of luck out there. Thank you for the hard work that you do and caring for patients and running the finances is some of the trickiest parts of running a clinic. So if you can get those things figured out, a lot of good happens out there in our communities. So thank you for your contribution. So, and thank you, Jill, for bringing this together.
Yes, thanks, Warren. You can find more information online at medicalmoneymatterspodcast.com, and you can subscribe to the Medical Money Matters content website for physician leaders to find budget templates and many other tools. We've included those links in the show notes. As I like to close out these podcasts, congratulations on taking the next step in your professional development and for making the commitment to learn about the financial and business aspects of your practice. I look forward to being on this journey with you and send you my heartfelt gratitude for all that you do for your patients all day, every day.